Phoenix is the latest and final installment of the X-Men series made by 20th Century Fox. Now that Disney has made them, they're going to try to incorporate them in the new Avengers movies. So 20th Century Fox, of course, is now having to wrap all of this up. Of course, Simon Kinberg has said previously that this was always meant to be like the last X-Men installment, so whether you want to believe that or not, completely up to you. This movie is about Jean Grey after a space mission absorbing this solar flare, and seemingly she's fine. In fact, she feels awesome. Her power level is like off the charts according to Nicholas Holt's Beast character. But as the movie starts to progress, she starts to remember certain things about her past that are taunting her pretty much, making her want to lose control. She has to face this trauma now. And this, of course, is another adaptation of the Dark Phoenix comics that X-Men The Last Stand tried to do, and a lot of people criticize that movie because of that. And that is a mediocre movie, obviously, so people are obviously looking to see them try to make another Dark Phoenix movie to try to be better than that. And unfortunately, at least for me, I actually think that X-Men The Last Stand, though that movie is not good, that's like a C, that movie's still kind of better than this one. Unfortunately, I was not a huge fan of this film. There are definitely things about this movie that I like. There's certain ideas as far as what this movie is trying to be that I was like, okay, I can really see them making this work in this movie if they spent more time with it, if everything felt fleshed out enough. It's a really good idea for this movie. Sophie Turner's Jean Grey, I actually think this is a better performance from her than X-Men Apocalypse. I thought she was really bland in that one, if you remember my review. And I also just really liked the way they uncovered her past, and I thought that made for a really interesting setup for her character, especially now that she has this uncontrollable type power affecting her. There's one action sequence near the end of the film set on this train. It lasts for about maybe 10 minutes or something, the majority of the third act, and I thought it was actually really well handled. There was a lot of energy behind the camera. All of the X-Men characters present had a lot of play and had some really great moments there that were really well staged and well thought out. It honestly was so exciting. It almost felt like it was taking place in another X-Men film. I wouldn't say like another movie completely, but like another X-Men movie where maybe the action is a little bit more vibrant and a little more exciting. My final thing that I could say I actually had a positive with is that it's hard not to like some of the characters that we've gotten used to at this point, like James McAvoy as Charles Xavier and Michael Fassbender as Magneto and Nicholas Hoult as Beast. It's hard not to just like them already because we're so used to them, and just the actors are, of course, doing their best. Not all of the actors are great, though, and that's where we're going to start segueing into the cons. As much as I really did like Sophie Turner better in this one, unfortunately her relationship with Ty Sheridan's Cyclops, I still didn't really feel for that at all. And it doesn't help that X-Men Apocalypse, I didn't really think did a very good job of setting them up to begin with, and then they immediately carry it over with this one, and they're already being thrusted into this big event where Jean Grey's losing control and Ty Sheridan's Cyclops, he doesn't really know how to handle this, and it's all really rushed. And that's, I guess, the biggest complaint that you could have with this movie, is that it feels like there's so much here that could take up like a longer movie, but it's only like an hour and 53 minutes exactly, and there's not even a post-credit scene, so it ends a little before that too. So there's really no time given to any of these characters that we've seen before in other movies, but because they were reintroduced in Apocalypse, and in my opinion, I didn't think they were reintroduced all that well, really, we're now having these characters face really big, heavy themes, and I didn't really think it really affected them all that much. As the movie was going by, and it was noticeably going by very quickly, for something that feels like it's like a big event, it honestly felt very inconsequential as things were even passing by. It honestly felt like a lot of the characters were just kind of drifting by and weren't really affected by much. Like, for example, I already mentioned the relationship with Cyclops and Jean and how I didn't really care for that, but another one of the X-Men team, Storm, she in this movie really doesn't have that much to do at all, and is really in this movie just because, well, people already know who Halle Berry is as Storm, and we've had her in the last one, so we might as well have her again, and it really didn't feel like she really affected any of the scenes. And also Nightcrawler, though he's always a pleasant to watch, like I'm a big fan of his powers at least, so it's always cool to see him, it never really feels like his character's really affected by anything going on, but they tried to set that up originally. Like, there's actually like a little mini argument between Cyclops and Storm that was like, oh, are they going to be on like different sides at some point, like what's going to happen? But then they're just kind of all on the same page again after a bit. So there's certain ideas that they had. Like I said, if they had fleshed it out well enough, if they had every character really well written as far as like how they're affected by this, it could have turned out great. But unfortunately, it just felt like there was really no tension in a lot of these scenes that felt like there should have been more tension. This is like highlighted as like the darker X-Men film. It's literally called Dark Phoenix. But it doesn't really feel all that dark. Like, it feels pretty bland, honestly. There's not a lot of humor, which is fine if they don't want to do that. Obviously, that is not a problem with me. I've loved movies that have had no humor before. However, it also doesn't really feel all that dark, and it doesn't really have me all that invested. So I can't really say I felt excited, I felt in suspense about anything. It just felt all very bland. And it also doesn't help that Simon Kinberg, he isn't really that good of a director. I watched his Twilight Zone episode, Blurry Man, and that was like, fine. Like, it was a well-directed episode, sure. But that's a TV episode, and sometimes it's not really a fair comparison as far as I really liked how they directed this one TV show, because there's also other creative influences involved with that. This movie he's directing, and he also is the sole writer on, and he is a longtime producer. The fact that it's as bland as it is, and it doesn't feel as climactic as it should, is really disappointing. I gotta be honest, guys, I've loved the X-Men movies for a very long time. Even Last Stand for a bit, when that first came out, I was really in love with that movie because I was a young man. You know, I walked into the living room one day and there was the first X-Men movie playing and I was hooked, and I watched the other two, and I was really hooked on this series for a long time. I've grown up with this series, I've seen it go in a lot of interesting places, and now that it's coming to the end here, and honestly, when I was watching it, it didn't even feel like it, you know? And a lot of people might say, well, it's because of Disney buying them out, because they had to end it abruptly. But if you remember what I said at the beginning of this video, Simon Kinberg recently stated that this was always meant to be the last one. So the fact that when it comes down to the ending of this movie, and it doesn't feel like a big ending to this series that we've all been watching for at least 19 years now, it's a little disappointing, to say the least. It also hurts for me to say that they make another timeline mess-up that's worse than any other timeline mess-up they've had before. And I know there are going to be people out there that are like, well, that's fine, they've always been kind of weird with the timeline. I'm aware that those people exist. However, the thing that I'm referring to involves the ending of this film, and it literally breaks this entire movie. Because I can't even say it without spoiling, but let's just say Days of Future Past made something very clear, like this is going to happen like this, but then when you get to this movie, things change already, and it's such a bad mess up. It's not even one of these random timeline, like, continuity errors that's like, oh, that's like such a small thing. Like, it's a pretty big thing that breaks this whole series, pretty much. At least the new timeline they're trying to establish. Simon Kinberg was trying to establish, who, need I remind you, has been a long-time producer on these things, and is now the writer and director of this film. The fact that he messed up that bad near the ending, even if they were trying to go for like a finale, this is supposed to be like a big finale moment, it still doesn't make sense at all with anything else they were trying to do, like, prior to this. Speaking of finales, the Quicksilver Magneto thing that I thought they were going to pursue more in another X-Men film after I saw Apocalypse, and how Quicksilver was going to tell Magneto that he's his dad, but then he kind of chickened out and didn't, and said, I'm just not going to. I thought for sure maybe they were going to do something in this that finally led to the reveal that, hey, Magneto, you're my dad. Maybe Jean Grey kills Quicksilver and Magneto's real upset about that. But they don't even do that. There's literally no conclusion to that storyline. So by the time this movie was wrapping up, there's still this one thing that's still left over from the other movie that they still haven't really concluded. The way they treated Quicksilver in this was really baffling to me. I am completely fine with them not doing another Quicksilver scene stealer, where they play a song and he does a bunch of things really fast, and then that's the scene stealer. I'm fine with them not doing that. They still show him going really fast for like two really quick scenes. I'm not a big fan of the way they kind of sidelined him out of the movie. But it's not a death, like you probably are thinking right now. I'm just going to tell you right now. It doesn't even go that far as this being the darker X-Men film. It doesn't even go for that. What they do instead is that they basically just take the same scene from Apocalypse, where Quicksilver's beating the crap out of Oscar Isaac, but he's going like he's catching up to Quicksilver and like stops him. They basically just do that, but just switch out Apocalypse with Jean Grey, and instead of just trapping him, like actually like moves his footing, like his platform where he's about to put his foot, so he just trips and rolls really fast, and then he's injured throughout the rest of the movie. That's how they treat him in this, and I was astonished that they didn't even want to give this character any closure with what they've already set up. I'm astonished that he made the movie this way, because you'd think someone who's been involved for so long would want to see certain things come to a close. If it's true that what he said about this always being the last one is actually true, you'd think they'd actually try to wrap things up satisfactory, but They didn't. It felt like they were almost winging it. It almost feels like Simon Kinberg doesn't even know what's been going on in these movies. Like almost as if he hasn't even seen any of these somehow. Because literally the stuff with Magneto is almost exactly the same as X-Men Apocalypse. He's trying to live the peaceful life. He doesn't want to be bothered by anyone. He just wants to live peacefully. But then because of a death, he's thrusted back into the action. He has that scene where it gets the helmet back, puts it back on. I'm Magneto once again, and we're gonna scuffle a bit, Charles. Like, it's almost exactly the same. And it's baffling that Michael Fassbender was even as good as he was, because if I was him, I'd probably be like, dude, this is literally almost the same exact story that I had in the last movie. Like, what the heck? There's an interesting idea where the X-Men are kind of split up into different factions as far as we gotta protect Jean Grey, she doesn't know what she's doing, and then we gotta kill Jean Grey because she's a danger, she'll kill us all. They have like this quick conversation beforehand where they're like, hey, we can't go in there about to fight because we can cause a lot of messes, and the government already hates us kind of because of Jean Grey right now, so we can't do that. You know, that story again where the government is just about to get these mutants once more, but then literally like 10 seconds later, the team that's trying to get to Jean Grey and kill her doesn't even do it stealthily, doesn't even try to sneak into the building she's at. They just start running into the street, trying to cross it to get to the building, and they're already fighting exploding stuff. It is so dumb. Like, they have this plan to go in and kill Jean Grey, but Magneto might as well have just walked in and be like, oh, hello, Jean. This is the part where I'm about to kill you. I wasn't going to sneak attack you or anything. I just wanted to announce it to you verbally, levitate to you, and just do it staring you in the eye. Like, why would... I know this is a comic book movie, and certain things about comic book movies are just kind of naturally dumb, but the fact that they constructed the scene that way, they're talking about how she's the most dangerous mutant ever. We can't just go in there. We'll get into a fight in the streets. People will hate us, but then they just do it anyways, and then they, of course, lose. It's like, bro, how? These characters aren't smart, but I know they've been smart before. It doesn't work. Jessica Chastain is an actress that I love. I adore Jessica Chastain. I think she's one of the best actresses working today. She's in so many great things. She's portrayed so many great characters. In this movie, I was actually kind of interested to see what she could do, because when I heard she was in it, I was like, I bet she must be playing some kind of villain. She could be like the best X-Men villain ever, maybe. And at first, she's pretty lively, you know, like she's playing like a lively Jessica Chastain personality, but then, literally 2 minutes later, something happens. I can't even really say because I didn't even know about this going in, but something happens to where all of her personality is just drained instantly, and then throughout the rest of the movie, her as this villain is just so lifeless and just so, like, uninteresting. Like, there's this whole group that want the power that Jean has, and they're just so uninteresting, and they're just thrown in there like, oh, these guys exist in this universe. Like, no intro to it at all, just, nah, here you go, that's it. Like, okay. They didn't really offer up any suspense as far as like, oh, the clock is ticking down until they get to Jean Grey. There's no sense of tension like that in the movie. As far as like physical fights go, they try to give them like, they can't be taken out by regular bullets, but eventually the X-Men just beat him up anyway, so it doesn't really matter. They really aren't that intimidating of a threat. I was just really bored with a lot of this movie, and I hate to say that because this is the last X-Men movie from 20th Century Fox before Disney gets their hands on it and does whatever with them in the MCU, and I was really, honestly, I have a list on Letterboxd, and I still had it on there as far as movies I was anticipating, because the idea was cool, and you could do a lot of great stuff with that. You could actually have made this a personal X-Men film. And for a couple parts of this movie, you could actually tell that that's what they were going for. Like, this is it. This is the personal X-Men film we want. Unfortunately, it's brought down by a lot of similar issues that the other X-Men films have had, and unfortunately, that makes it one of my least favorite ones. Honestly, I think I prefer Apocalypse, because at least Apocalypse, Bryan Singer, say whatever you want about him, I've said a lot about him, but at least there's some kind of directorial vision whenever he makes a movie. So even in Apocalypse, when certain scenes aren't working, there's at least an idea, a flare of inspiration there. That's like, alright, that was kind of cool, just execution wasn't that good. In this movie, it all feels very studio safe. Like, it's dark, but not too dark. It's funny, but not too funny either. It has character moments, but not a whole lot. It feels very studio made, and I guess that's the biggest problem with Simon Kinberg doing it, is that he's always been a producer, and it almost feels like they hired him to direct it just because he knows how to make things safe. I really wanted to love all of the cast in this, but a lot of the characters just, I didn't really feel like had a lot of play. There's certain characters that get killed and I was like, oh, I barely knew them anyways. They're really new and fresh, so I don't care. Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique, I complained about this in my Apocalypse review because I had never noticed how she didn't give a crap before. And even rewatching First Class and Days of Future Past, I was like, she's really good as Mystique. In Apocalypse, and unfortunately still, in this one, you can tell she doesn't care. The makeup on her doesn't even look as good as the makeup for her in the other X-Men films, and this is the most recent one. The makeup getting worse is not good. Like, that's bad. That's really bad. And unfortunately, I could say the same thing for the CGI. It's not as CGI'd as an Apocalypse, for example, but still, when they have CGI here, it still doesn't look all that good, and that's really unfortunate because, like I said, this is the most recent X-Men film, and it costs like about $200 million. We're in the future, where effects can look great, makeup can look stunning, and in this, it's just like, it feels like the rest of the movie, which is half-assed. I gotta give Dark Phoenix a C-. There are certain ideas that I liked, and there are certain scenes where they tried to pursue that idea, and I was like, yes, this is good, focus on this, but they really didn't overall. There's a lot of characters that I've liked before that I really don't really care for all that much now because they did a poor job of reintroducing them as their younger selves in Apocalypse, and then they just completely carry over to this with still barely any intro or barely any development still. Jean Grey, I think, got better, but Cyclops I still think wasn't that good. Storm was barely utilized. Mystique got worse and worse. Magneto is just going through the motions, and though there is one entertaining action scene taking up the majority of the third act, that still doesn't really excuse the fact that a lot of this movie, action-wise, is filmed very flat. A lot of scenes, pretty much every scene is filmed very flat in this, and it doesn't feel like there's any directorial flair behind the camera, which is a really big bummer because, honestly, I prefer what they did with Dark Phoenix in X-Men The Last Stand. Honestly, I think Brett Ratner, despite him not being that good a filmmaker, you can at least tell that him behind the camera, there is actually some good moments of action directing in that. In this, there's really that one train sequence, but then every other action scene that feels really lame and underwhelming. Just the whole movie's underwhelming, and I really hate to say that because, like I said, I've been following these movies ever since I first saw that X-Men film, walking into the living room and just seeing it on when I was like 5 or something like that, and I've been in love with them for so long, and now to see them end off like this, with the New Mutants still being delayed as much as possible, it was a very disappointing send-off. And speaking of that send-off, when you get to the ending of this movie, it feels very unearned, and like I said, it doesn't make sense as with the timeline that they already established to begin with. So if you've seen Dark Phoenix, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.